Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Face Your Ears podcast. My name is Justin Hochella, co-hosting with Richard Bozic. Welcome.
Hello. How's it going?
Good. I just wanted to share an update on Josh D'Elia, who was a guest on our podcast several months back. As part of his duo Sleek Teeth that he is in, they've released their EP, self-titled EP, I should say, Sleek Teeth, which you can check out on all major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, etc. Definitely check it out. It is fantastic. I absolutely love it. And they actually played a show at the Belasco, popular venue in Los Angeles, and it was pretty incredible. They played with a really amazing lineup there. You can check them out on social media to get a look into what that show was like. Looked like it was amazing. I wish I could have been there. It looked like a lot of fun, but it's really cool to see all of that stuff come to light. I know when Josh was on our podcast, he was talking about how a lot of that stuff was coming to fruition. It's really great to see it blossoming now. So definitely check out the new EP. I'll put a link to it in our show notes so that you can dive into it and check it out. Other than that, I am working on music a lot lately, it seems. I've been producing music very quickly, which is really great. I'm really proud of that fact that I've been cranking out music quickly. In the past, I often just get bogged down in the 4-bar, 8-bar loop that we often get bogged down in, and just getting a little kernel of an idea and it doesn't go anywhere. But yeah, I've been producing some songs lately just for myself, just for fun, and that's been great. I've been working with a good friend, both of ours, John Hildreth. I know he works with you with voice lessons, but he and I are longtime friends, and we've decided to do some Depeche Mode covers. And so we're working on those. It's been a very long project for us, but I've been working on that as well lately. So there's some updates from me that I just wanted to share. Rich, how about you? What's going on?
First of all, great news to hear about Josh. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great. Moving up in the world. Very good. And good to hear about your projects that are going on. Over here, I've been teaching a lot. I'm prepping for a concert, a winter-themed concert coming up in December with a bunch of my students. We're going to be playing everything from holiday music to songs that are winter-themed. Should be interesting. That's on December 7th. Also, I've been in the studio recording tracks, trying to finish up this album with a band that I'm in called Beak Fist with my buddy Alex. We're trying to wrap it up now. So 8-song album slowly coming to fruition.
That's great. I know you guys have been working hard on that for a while, and it's a process. There's a lot of elements. I know you've talked about the drums in the past. That's a lot. People don't necessarily realize how intricate drums are. Drums alone, right? Not to mention everything else going on in that project. So I'm glad to hear you're making progress there.
That project, I feel, is a big factor of why we're sitting here today. Because when Alex and I started working together, we decided, hey, instead of going to the studio, why don't we invest in our own equipment and try to record this album ourselves, be able to take our time and work at our own pace. And so that's what prompted me to finally pull the trigger on a home studio. And that's why we are sitting here today, my friend.
This episode, I think, is the next step from an episode we recorded a while back, and that episode was DIY Studio Setup. Today, we're talking about DIY Studio Step Up. So a little bit of a shift. What happens when somebody has a basic studio in place, but they want to go further for whatever reason? Like Rich described, where you're doing bigger, more ambitious projects, you're doing more recording, whatever the case may be. But over time, our studio needs evolve. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can grow your studio to meet those needs. This makes me think about that dream you were telling me about, that friend of yours that is, I think, an audio engineer. He's also kind of a musician, but he, I guess, had a dream where he died and went to heaven, and there was like some angel there showing him like, this amazing studio upgrade kind of thing that he had access to, and then the angel got mad at him for something to do with dubstep or something. How did that dream go again?
Wake up. Yes, you. Wake up. You've arrived. You're in the afterlife.
Huh? What? I died? How?
You should have gotten out more. Gone for a walk. Left the studio.
What? Who are you? Your voice sounds familiar.
I am John, your music guardian angel.
Wait. I know your voice.
Yes, it's me, John, your Sweetwater sales rep. And me, John, your Universal Audio tech support guy. Yes, John, the guy who always responds on the forums. I mean, come on, who really responds on forums?
Angel? Wait. Where am I? Am I in heaven? I made it to heaven?
Yes. Hard to believe, but yes, well, you didn't have much time to do bad things in life. You didn't get out much, and luckily you only used your computer for recording, right? And only browsed troubleshooting forums. But I see you had a VPN.
Yeah, just to watch foreign films not found in the U.S.
Right. Well, luckily VPNs block access to the big man as well.
What? Really?
Well, anyways, moving on. Let me show you what the afterlife in heaven has in store for you. Behold.
Whoa. Wow.
Yes, it's so big in here. There's so much room. The ceilings are nice and tall and perfectly insulated for optimal noise reduction.
This is amazing. What a studio.
Yes, look at that adjustable desk, that comfortable chair, that huge monitor. Wait, what software are we running on that computer, you may ask? Hold on, that looks like a Mac. I know you had problems in your previous life with Macs, but here, everything works flawlessly. Up here, Apple releases software updates that never conflict with your audio interface. In fact, we have an exclusive audio interface that Apple has released that works perfectly with Logic Pro. They actually bought out Universal Audio and produce all of the hardware under the Apple umbrella with constant updates and flawless customer service. Not that you will need much of that up here, but you can still call them anyways. And someone will answer.
Yeah, right. No one will answer if I call customer service. Come on now.
Oh, yes, they will. And check this out.
What?
Yes, your eyes do not deceive you. Inputs and outputs as far as the eye can see. MIDI keyboard controllers with an infinite key range and controllers that can read my mind and automatically map to whatever I want. No serial numbers ever. Infinite tracks and plugins in my DAW. Cables that never tangle.
Whoa. No way. This is unreal.
Well, it's your reality now. Project deadlines that are always met. Musicians who are always prepared and on time for your recording sessions. And all they want to do is record your original music. Every song you write will be nominated and win a Grammy. Every radio station and film soundtrack will feature your music. Every playlist will have your songs at the top.
Well, that's great.
Everyone will love what you do. Men will want to be you. Women will want to be with you. Children will laugh and cry with joy when they see you walk down the streets. Your name will be on every billboard. Your picture hung in every household.
Wait, whoa. Chill. This is great, but I didn't ask for this. I mean, I would have been down for all of this when I was, like, alive, but, I'm in heaven now. Like, where is the party, man? Is there a heavenly rave happening or anything like that? I mean, if you want, I could throw together a dubstep tune for something like that.
What? Dubstep? You dare to squander the greatest technological wonders in recording on dubstep? You ungrateful heathen. You undeserving swine. You poser.
Hey, like, no offense. Like, you're totally gatekeeping right now. I was just, like, messing around with loops back in my previous life. Just, like, putting stuff together with YouTube tracks. Like, none of this fancy stuff.
Anyways, I just remember that being a really weird dream. And it kind of reminds me of today's episode. Dying, going to heaven, getting all this amazing gear. Anyway, let's get into it.
Down to business here, Justin. So, I have my basic studio set up. But now I'm noticing I think I need to upgrade my interface. What kind of things should I be looking at? What do I need to consider?
This is a question that really pops up, especially when you're trying to do more sophisticated recording or have more sophisticated recording applications or situations or however you want to word it. I know a lot of folks can start off with something like a simple 2 input, 2 output style interface, which gets the job done up to a certain point. And it really also depends on what your goals are, I think. So if your goals are just to record yourself one instrument at a time, as long as your interface has some good tech specs, if you will, you should be good to go. For example, the Apollo Twin doesn't have a lot of inputs and outputs. However, it definitely has exceptional quality. This is a question, or a problem, I should say, that comes into play when you're trying to record more instruments at once. And so, Rich, I know this was a problem that you had to solve for because you have a lot of different instruments that you are trying to record simultaneously. So
Yes.
You've got a drum kit, right? You've got keyboards, guitars, like voice.
Yes, so I record not only one-on-one with clients, but I also like to use the equipment to record band rehearsals when people come over and we're jamming.
Yeah. So I think that that's a consideration is, when you have more instruments that you need to record simultaneously, obviously you need more inputs. And so that's something to look at. In addition to, as I was alluding to before, if your audio interface doesn't have the greatest capture quality, I would call it, sampling frequency to be technical, that's another feature to look at because you do want to have an interface that can record at 96 kilohertz is usually the standard to capture really pristine audio. In addition to that, take a closer look at the kind of actual hardware that interface is using, what kind of preamp technology and so forth that the interface inputs have that are going to color the sound for better or worse. So there's some further detail to look at there. Another thing to look at, especially as computers are evolving, is the way it's connected. So for example, Apple just released a new Mac Mini that's actually pretty stellar as a music production machine, and it only has USB-C. And USB-C is becoming more and more of the standard. In fact, I would argue that it basically is the standard now going forward, at least with Apple computers. You're not going to find USB-A on an Apple computer anymore. And so that's something to think about. Not that it's going to necessarily degrade the quality if you're using like an adapter or something like that, but it's always nice just to be able to plug straight into USB-C, a quality of life thing. And speaking of connections. Another one that is pretty interesting that I know you and I have talked about, Rich, is ADAT, which is basically digital audio. And it's essentially a way to stream audio over light. It's like a laser beam through a single cable. A lot of interfaces, like the one I'm sitting here next to, I have an AudioFuse 16 rig, and it actually has multiple ADAT ports. And what's the so what of that? Big deal. What's really interesting is that the company Arturia that makes this interface also makes essentially a breakout box interface with 8 inputs. And what you can do is plug 8 analog devices into this box and then connect that little box to this AudioFuse 16 rig over a single ADAT cable. And voila, you've got an additional 8 inputs showing up within that AudioFuse 16 rig device.
Some people might be thinking, and I thought this too, I have an interface, I have 2 inputs, I could just keep plugging in the different devices, and why do I need so many inputs? That just seems ridiculous. But I have a feeling that what you'll run into in that situation, as I did early on, is you get tired of unplugging and plugging things back in.
Yeah.
And as your studio grows and you add more instruments to your studio and more mics, you don't want to have to keep on unplugging and plugging in, even if you're just by yourself, one musician recording by yourself.
Yeah, that's kind of me, right, Rich? I've got a
Oh, yeah.
bazillion keyboards and
It's the Star Trek Enterprise over there, folks.
yeah, that's one of the main reasons I have an interface like the AudioFuse 16 rig that has 16 physical inputs, is I can just plug basically most of my gear. It doesn't even accommodate all of it, but most of it into that single interface. And so that's another thing, is as our studios grow, we maybe get more synthesizers or guitars or effects or whatever. That's something that is worth considering, is an interface with more inputs and more outputs, because the outputs are interesting in that they can be used for like effects loops. In other words, we can send audio out of some of the outputs, like into an effects pedal, and route it back into the interface. So there's a lot of really cool creative applications that can be had when you have an interface that has more input and output.
I'm starting to get into more software instruments. Aside from my keyboard, what else can I add to my studio to help out in that department?
Software instruments, they've come such a long ways. Whether it's a synthesizer or a sample-based instrument emulating a guitar or a choir or something like that, like we talked about in our previous episode. Check it out, episode 28. And with a MIDI controller, there's a lot to be had there in terms of physical controls. And Rich, you actually have a really cool device on your desktop that has some drum pads on it. That is a great tool to have if you're trying to lay down some kind of a drum beat in a project.
Yes.
It just makes creating that much, much easier than plunking away on piano keys. It's just a little bit unnatural in that way.
I have the Akai MPK Mini. It's a tiny little keyboard, about 2 octaves on the keyboard end. And then there are 8 pads, and then there are various dials and whatnot that you could program on it.
Yeah, that's right. It also has knobs that are mappable, I guess is the word, to your software. So, for example, those knobs you can map to maybe something like a really popular one on synthesizers, cutoff, the filter cutoff frequency, which is going to make the sound lighter or darker, is probably the simplest way to put it, or anything. Those are completely mappable. And what's great is that you're getting tactile interaction with the software, and you can map multiple knobs so that you can use both hands to twist all the different knobs and really get in there and have interaction, like physical interaction with that software instrument. And really, the sky's the limit. It's up to you what those knobs control in your DAW. That's something to really think about as you get more comfortable and you start diving into these virtual instruments. Having a MIDI controller that allows you to control the aspects of it is a really great thing to invest in and to take a look at.
When you're in Logic and you add one of the programmable synths as a software instrument in your project, The thing that's fun about having this kind of controller is you don't have to sit there and do all of those controls with your mouse. This Akai also has a little joystick on it as well that's also programmable, but you can use it to move parameters around within a field and whatnot. Definitely would recommend one of these devices.
Yeah. Maybe something to save for a different episode, but there is a way to, I know you can do this in Ableton Live. You can actually use a video game controller to control your instrument. You could use like an Xbox or PlayStation controller to trigger notes or manipulate settings in the software synthesizer. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. And another thing, not as technical whiz-bang wizardry, but weighted keys are something I think worth mentioning in a MIDI controller, especially if you're doing more traditional music with piano or orchestral instruments. Having those weighted keys makes a difference. I know, Rich, your Mod X8 has weighted keys on it, correct? Yeah. That just adds a different interaction, again, with the software and just the playing technique and so forth. And it also reminds me, another feature that you can find in MIDI controllers is something called Aftertouch. And Aftertouch basically is pressing down on the keys and then pushing further down. That's a control that you can map to whatever you want in the software. So it's like press down the keys and maybe you press down a little bit harder and it causes the reverb to swell or the sound to get brighter or darker or whatever. That's a really cool control that's available in some more advanced MIDI controllers and synthesizers.
Another thing to mention are drum pads. So I have a full electronic kit, but you can also get drum pads, which you could use with sticks that are a lot smaller. Maybe some of them I've seen are maybe 2 feet by wide by maybe 2 by 1 or something like that, with a bunch of small round pads on them that you could program for different parts of the drum kit. And you can actually, if you're a drummer, can actually play out some of those things. Might be easier than dragging little MIDI dots to the screen to actually play it out yourself, or using a loop if you want something and you can play it out. That could be a way to do it.
So what's cool is the sky's the limit. You can sample banging pots and pans and like throwing silverware around your kitchen and then bring those samples into a DAW and then play those with the device Rich is talking about. There's literally no end to what you can play with these drum pads. It could be anything from traditional, drum kit sounds to literally any sound that you want to program in there. It just really is a great way to, I think, interact with the software in a more physical way. I think that's the theme here with MIDI controllers, drum pads, and so forth, is it gets us away from sort of the restrictions of just a keyboard or a mouse, and like you said, clicking and dragging in a sequencer window, like that's not as natural. And so I think it's really cool to give musicians that sort of freedom of physical expression with plunking and pulling and, and hitting and twisting and all of that stuff and mapping that into the software. It's definitely something to think about. There's all kinds of great stuff to check out.
Awesome. Let's now move into the software realm. What kind of things can you recommend if we want to take our studio to the next level?
Yeah, I think this is a great topic, especially circling back to what we were talking about earlier with audio interfaces. Rich, you and I have studios where we actually have multiple audio interfaces. As I was alluding to before, my AudioFuse 16 rig is full, but I still have other devices. And so I actually have a secondary audio interface, a nice Scarlett 18i8 Gen 3. It does a great job.
Yeah, listeners, if you want to hop on our Facebook and Instagram, there are some pictures. When I went to Michigan and visited Justin and we set up his home studio after a renovation, there's some nice pictures of his studio up there.
Yeah, you can check it out, see it in all its glory. Having multiple interfaces presents a bit of a problem because as you go into a DAW like Logic Pro or Ableton Live, it only allows you to select one piece of hardware at a time. What if you have two interfaces like I do and you want to bounce between those two interfaces? Oh, I've got synthesizer A on interface 1 and synthesizer B on interface 2, and it would be annoying to have to go in to the settings and constantly switch back and forth, especially if I want to play that project back and listen to those two synthesizers at the same time. So that presents a problem. And the solution is something like Loopback Audio, which is software by a company called Rogue Amoeba. They've been around the Mac audio game for a while, but what Loopback does is it allows you to create virtual audio devices. And what I mean by that is you can actually pair or group your hardware interfaces or hardware devices, really anything that your Mac sees as an audio device, so that your Mac sees it as one singular device. So for example, I have a quote virtual audio device that combines my Scarlett 18i8 interface with my AudioFuse 16 rig. And so when I use that virtual device in Logic Pro, it sees all of the different inputs of both of those interfaces. So I don't have to switch between them. So Loopback's a great solution for anybody using multiple interfaces and wants to use that in a singular DAW like Logic or Ableton Live.
I actually wanted to add something. I love Loopback. It has multiple uses, not only in this way that you've talked about with regard to combining devices through software to use together, but also, let's say you're working with a friend who's in a different state on a project, and you want to be able to have your audio play from your DAW onto the call. You can actually, in Loopback, there's a way to be able to route that audio so that your microphone that you're talking over with your friend on Skype, let's say, and the audio can all be together, and so your friend can hear what you're working on in your project in real time, and you can work on stuff together. So I found that a cool application for Loopback.
Yeah, that's another great thing, is that Loopback doesn't just do hardware. Rich was saying Loopback also accounts for software. So that could be as simple as combining your microphone in your Scarlett 18i8 interface with Apple Music. And then you go into Zoom, and you would then select whatever that virtual device is that combines your microphone and Apple Music, so that you can talk to the person, they can hear your voice, but then they can also hear you playing the music from the Apple Music application. And that's one simple example. But yeah, sky's the limit again. Like, you can combine any grouping of audio, hardware, and any software on your Mac. It doesn't have to be music related. It could be your Chrome browser. It could be a video editor. It could be anything. So yeah, it's really incredible what you can do with Loopback. Another option that is free and built in, at least to the Mac, and I'm sure there's free solutions on Windows. I just don't know what those are, but we can speak to the Mac. That's what we use here on Face Your Ears. And it's the AudioMIDI setup software, which is software that allows you to set up your studio in software. So this is what your Mac essentially sees for both audio and MIDI. For the audio side, what's really cool is you can create aggregate devices. And so similar to Loopback in that it allows you to aggregate hardware, but it doesn't allow you to aggregate software. That's one of the advantages of using Loopback. But if you have multiple audio interfaces, for example, this is great. So you can combine multiple audio interfaces out of the box with a Mac very easily, so that your DAW of choice sees just one device, which is really handy. And if you are someone that, like me, that has multiple MIDI devices, AudioMIDI setup is something to take a look at. You have to, in a sense, because it allows you to name your devices, and so that way they show up correctly in your DAW of choice, whether it's Live or Cubase or Logic, whatever. So that's something else to become familiar with as your studio evolves, and you maybe get some synthesizers piling up in there. So some things to think about.
Cool. So just to recap, today's episode, we talked about expanding upon a basic home studio. We started with the interface. Things that you could think about in a new interface are better preamps, more inputs and outputs. That's one thing that you can upgrade. The next is the ability to use MIDI controllers to run software instruments such as drum pads, maybe adding a keyboard to your setup if you don't have one already, and other various MIDI controllers. And finally, we talked about software assistants such as Loopback and using AudioMIDI setup on a Mac. So thanks, Justin. I think this is a nice little compilation of things that we can do to upgrade our home studio.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you're able to take something away from this, dear listener, in evolving your studio. Feel free to reach out, let us know what you think, and if you have any other tips or suggestions or thoughts to consider when stepping up your home studio. I want to thank everyone again for listening, and I also would love to mention that we have a new ad for this podcast, and so you might be used to hearing our typical outro message for Face Your Ears, but we thought we'd share our new ad to close this episode out. Thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.
Face Your Ears is a podcast for musicians of all levels working in their own home studios, eager to bring their creative ideas to life.
Join us as we explore the ins and outs of music creation in an approachable and engaging way.
Each episode features a blend of technical tips, practical advice, and insightful anecdotes, making it both informative and fun.
Listen to the Face Your Ears podcast on your favorite podcast platform today.